Okay, say it.
Brothers and sisters, a very important announcement, and it's. I wish I could say it's good news, but it's not good news. It's but we wish it is good news for in some way. But Sayyid Abbas, as you know, will be departing soon. He'll be returning back to his homeland, and inshallah in a few weeks. So it's to our unfortunate that our blessing with Sayyid Abbas will come to an end. But of course, it won't be the last time he will come to Yasin. Of course, he'll be coming to Yasin for summer times, for programs, Muharram, Ramadan. He's still going to be coming, but we won't have the blessing of having him here every week. So please do take advantage of this blessing while he's here with us for the next few weeks. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. A question that we must ask ourselves is stress something that is good for us Islamically, or is it negative and bad? We see verses of the Holy Quran on one side saying that the awliya of Allah, la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun, that the wali of God, the friend of God, does not have fear, does not have grief. So therefore, from this verse so far, we understand that grief and fear is something that is not good. But yet, we also see if a person does not worry about things, and as you just recited Du'a Kumail, for example, you read a dua that it is training us to be fearful of the hereafter, and it talks about the tool of the bala, how long the calamity will be for. So it's trying to instill in us some type of stress, fear, or maybe even you can say being anxious about death and the hereafter. So tonight we want to resolve this debate in our minds as to should we have stress or should we not have stress. When you look at some of the statistics, you see that 43% of adults feel more anxious, say this was in 2024, than the previous year. We see that Americans are very anxious people. Or that we see, for example, that in the past year, the prevalence of anxiety disorder among US adults was about 19%. People are anxious. And in terms of gender differences, females have more prevalence to experiencing anxiety disorder. Or nearly a third of adults will experience an anxiety disorder in one time of their lives. In one time there will be an issue that a third will be anxious. So when we look at these statistics, we understand it this way, that generally speaking, a non-believer, a non-Muslim, will be one that will have more anxiety, will have more stress. And that the Islamic instructions are here to give us and fulfill us from within, to give us direction, why we're created, where we'll go to. And this causes us to have direction in our lives. This causes us to have less stress. So to summarize this so far, now I'm not saying that a person that is, for example, stressed out is one who is a bad Muslim. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I know the remedy, because, there are those who are, experts in this field, that it is, they can either prescribe for someone who has anxiety disorder, medication, can give them, for example, skills and techniques to use. But what we are trying to discuss is, from Islam, what can we do in order to, minimize our amount of stress? Many of us, for example, our parents, our kids sometimes cause us a lot of stress, especially when we have young kids. Or we are worried about their future. Is this good or not, for example? Or there are some students here, some of them took the SAT, for example, recently, or they're applying to college, they have stress. What can we do in order to that positive amount of stress, and what is it to maximize that, and that negative type of anxiety and stress that we should not have, that we can remove from our lives? When we look at the Holy Quran and we try to analyze to see what is the sources of stress, one of them we see is from shaitan, from verses of Quran, is that shaitan promises you al-faqr. Shaitan tries to scare you off. Faqr, you can be either poverty or inability. That one of the ways and deceptions that shaitan uses is to cause you fear. And this fear, when it is there for a while, long term, this fear causes anxiety. Because some say, for example, fear at the beginning is, different. Anxiety causes a person to have inability. They get so anxious, they don't want to do anything. So we see from the Quran that shaitan promises us or tries to scare us away. Now this can be either through death. This could be either through poverty, for example. If I don't do this business, for example, if I don't sell this, brother, it's haram, right? Your income is haram. You should get, I'm going to, not have enough income. If I don't, for example, sell this at this price, I won't have enough. I'm always anxious, and shaitan plays with this anxiety so that I could perform haram. There's one aspect of, for example, what shaitan does. On the other side, what happens if a person is too relaxed and is one that is never stressed out? For example, let's talk about good types of stress. One of those is to wait for the imam of the age, to have idtirab, to have anxiety in a way, that where is my imam? What's going on in the world? Some of the traditions say if a person does isbah or wakes up in the morning and doesn't have ihtimam or importance to the affairs of the Muslims, he is not a Muslim. So therefore we see actually thinking of the imam of the age, thinking of the genocide that is happening in Gaza and our brothers and sisters being starved. This is something that is actually a requirement of a person to be Muslim. When you look at some of the letters or statements of the Marja'iyya, Ayatollah al-Udma Sistani, he says that I cannot even eat our food or consume food, for example, when it comes to Gaza and what is happening there. So you see that this type of stress is something that is rewardable, that I should be concerned. Of course, we said not in a way that it causes you inability to lose hope, for example, but for you to care enough about it to do something. So that is good. Another type of stress that is good is why we recite our du'as. Why are there so many descriptions about the Holy Quran, about heaven and hell? You see, for example, maybe you can say every page of the Quran, almost every page, is about something of the hereafter, heaven or hell. And that's for you to have some level of stress, that where will I go to? What happens when I die, for example? Our problem is this. Those things that we should have stress about or be anxious about or have fear about, we are not fearful. Those things that we should not be fearful of. And the Quran goes through a few set of these, for example. One is poverty. You shouldn't be fearful of this. Two, because rizq is in the hands of God. Two, you shouldn't be fearful for your lives because life is in Allah's hands. It is a matter that inna lillah, we belong to Allah. So these are affairs that we have to work on ourselves in order to maximize our stress when it comes to the good. In order to, for example, when you recite the Quran, recite Dua Kumail, that generally speaking, that I am living my life in a way that I'm always worried, what will happen to me? What if God doesn't forgive me? What about haqqun nas, the rights of the people? What about, for example, this person I would backbite behind them? This person, for example, I was, not careful of. One of the interesting things in the Hawza that you see for example, in the first year, second year, even later on, is generally they put their shoes outside of classrooms. And sometimes there's not, enough to organize all the shoes. It goes out because there's a lot of students. And you see that very cautious student, the first year, second year, they're very cautious that they don't step on someone else's shoes, for example, because they have this stress when it comes to this fear that what happens if I cause destruction of property to somebody. For example, sometimes you see like they'll ding someone's car and they'll write their phone number, for example, please, I can't find you, call me, allow me to make it up for you. This is good. This is, for example, a person good. Or please forgive me, I spoke bad about you, for example. These are, when it comes to huquq al-nas, we should be careful and have this. But when it comes to other affairs, when it comes to my work, and we live in a capitalistic society, we live in a society where many of us are taking loans. Ayatollah Sistani's ruling is about istinqath, which I can explain later, about in a way that you can make some certain loans. You can do it with an intention that will remove the hormat from you, for example, in this way, in this fashion. If somebody has, for example, a mortgage, you can transfer it to istinqath and do it this way. But regardless, you have stress about your mortgage, stress about your work. What happens if I lose my work? What happens, for example, my health care, for example. These are things that I think, generally speaking, that we are very cautious of, we're very anxious of. But when it comes to affairs of deen, has God forgiven me? What will happen? Will I go to heaven or not, or will I go to hell? These are affairs that we think is resolved, but yet it is not resolved. Does anyone here have, a sign from God that they will go to heaven for sure? If you do, please, let me know who you are and take me with you, inshallah. But we don't have such a, card, for example, that you're going to heaven, you will be saved. No, none of us. So therefore, we should be anxious about these things and see how the Holy Quran talks about these affairs. Let's go through some of the verses of the Holy Quran when it comes to things we should be fearful of. So one, we said, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَ. Indeed, it is only Shaitan who frightens his allies. Shaitan makes you afraid. Don't speak up, for example, when it comes to Palestine, for example. When it comes to fighting against oppression, don't speak up, don't say anything, for example. Or some of those countries, for example, right now, people are debating what should they do, for example, when it comes to resistance. No, just leave them alone, they will leave you alone, for example. Such a mentality. Quran says, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَ. Shaitan uses fear as a tool. So therefore, when you go through the Quran, it's telling us this reoccurring theme, not to fear. And when you look at the Islamic figures, from the Prophet to Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, you see all of them are completely fearless. As behavior paradigms, you learn, for example, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he fought people, individuals, that sometimes it says that a tribe would be needed to take down such a person. Imam Ali alayhi salam would take him down. Or the Prophet would ask, who wants to challenge this person? Everyone's quiet. Or in places where everyone would run away, Imam Ali alayhi salam would stay with the Prophet, either that is, for example, in Uhud, or in the Battle of Hunayn, where Quran mentions that you ran away. And a few were there with the Prophet. And that was Imam Ali alayhi salam, because he is teaching us not to be afraid. There's interesting narration that they say, attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam, that they ask him, why don't you have, for example, a faster horse? Why don't you have a racing horse when it comes to the battlefield? And Imam Ali alayhi salam mentions that there's no need of it. Because one, either I need a fast horse in order to run away from the people, and I will not be running away from the people. Or I will need a fast horse in order to chase down people that are running away, and I will not chase down people who are running away. So you see, Imam Ali alayhi salam is teaching us that fear is something that does not exist in his life. Or you look at the life of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and hopefully this Muharram and Safar, we learn from the lessons of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Did you see how Imam Hussein alayhi salam know all these maghaltel that you have, all the different historical records of Ashura, no cases there that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was afraid. You never have that. That actually it mentions that he would give bravery, he would give light, nur, to the other companions. He was the source of light and nur on the day of Ashura, and especially the last time when he has no other companions and he fights an army of 10,000, 30,000, you see, with such bravery he fights against them. So as Muslims were being taught not to be afraid, and sometimes here it says poverty. One of the reasons for that is that rizq is in God's hands. You should try your hardest, the best. And going to work is something that is, a very good deed. Bringing in halal income is one of the great acts of worship. But you should never be afraid that God will take away my rizq. You should never be afraid because you have to have yaqeen and certainty that Allah is providing. Or we see other verses in the Quran that when it comes to qital and fighting, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ قِيلَ لَهُمْ كُفُّوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِتَالُ. And when qital and fighting is ordained for them, إِذَا فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَخْشَوْنَ النَّاسَ كَخَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. When it comes to jihad or fighting, there are those who they are afraid of people as if they fear Allah. It's mixed. Instead of fearing Allah, they're afraid of people. وَأَشَّدُّ خَشْيَةً. Or they're even more frightened. The more frightened of these people that God has created than Allah Himself. So you see, another example in the Holy Quran is when it comes to life and death. It means that when it comes to qital, and during the time of the Prophet, they're ordered, and it's difficult for them. Fighting is something that is not easy to fight against, especially when you're outnumbered and you have, for example, more weapons. It's something very, very difficult. So Quran is saying too, the second theme you see in the Quran, that fear Allah, don't fear people. Again, so when you learn this and you practice this, these verses of Quran, you remove anxiety from your lives. You remove, because one of the root of anxiety is fear. When you remove fear of poverty, remove fear of death, and these are important issues, you become one who enjoys life. Or it says, أَيْنَمَا تَكُونُوا يُدْرِككُمْ الْمَوْتُ. Wherever you are, death will overtake you. وَلَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُرُوجٍ مُشَيَّدًا. Even if you should be in the towers of lofty construction, death will come. So what are you afraid of? Everyone has a time to leave. There's nobody that's going to be living here forever. Even the best of God's prophets, or the prophets that we have, except for Isa alayhi salam and possibly others, Khidr, for example, they have passed away. So we should pass away too, because only Allah remains. So this is the theme that we see throughout the Quran, that the cause of fear, the cause of anxiety, which is fear, and two important factors in human life. One is, I'm afraid to die. But Quran is saying, do not be afraid of death. Wherever you are, death will come. I'm afraid of poverty. Do not be afraid. Wherever you are, Allah will provide. So what are the practical steps? Because, conquering anxiety and fear, even though there are differences, we said these are two different matters, but there are similarities, and that similarity is, fearing something. What instructions do I have? What can I do? And these will be the last 15 minutes. Inshallah, we'll try to end here in about 13 minutes. What can I do to try to make myself less anxious, more brave, less fearful of God's creation, and at the same time, transfer that fear and anxiety to things that I really should be afraid of? For example, forgiveness. Am I forgiven or not? The rights of the people. Am I doing my social obligations when it comes to, for example, injustice and oppression? Am I doing what is right? I'm going to give a few steps. One is this. Naturally, what is the solution? This is in a way, a skill that we have to develop in our lives. A skill that we should be training. Did you notice, like, for example, in the society we live, fear is not something that is looked at as negative. Fear is not something I should be, for example, embarrassed about. I try to actually instill fear in others. Besides, I'm not talking about like scary movies or whatever. I'm talking about the fact that it's okay for like the father figure, the one who is or for example, the one who is leading the family to be fearful. But yet, maybe that isn't the correct approach. You should be teaching your children as a father or as a mother, for example, that I am fearless, I will protect you. Because that child looks, if dad's afraid, mom's afraid, or for example, in a way, I share my fear with them, for example, and I breed fear and I cause others to fear. That's not something good. We should, as a community, teach each other bravery, not fear. Because we said, what is one of the tools that shaitan has? It is through what? Through fear. The first is iman. I think that many of you, when you have, everyone has ups and downs when it comes to iman. And you look at when you were the most spiritual, the most connected to God. It was also the same time that you were the most fearless, you were the least amount of anxious. For example, maybe it was a holy place, maybe it was a holy night, maybe it was ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There's lessons. Remember, after Muharram and Safar, we should be learning from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. One of those is not to fear. That's one lesson from the over 100 lessons of Karbala, is not to fear. So hopefully after Muharram and Safar, I should learn from Imam Hussein. A lot of those things I'm afraid of, when I really think of them, they're nothing. So the stronger my iman is, and faith means what? What slams actually breaks fear of death? Iman. How does iman break fear of death? Because iman is telling me I will live forever. I'm not going to be annihilated. It's another stage of life. You can never really kill me. All you're doing is transferring me into another stage of life. Look at the example, for example, of Habib and Najjar in the Quran, Surah Yasin. Surah Yasin talks about 3 Rasuls, 3 prophets or messengers, according to Tafsir Namuna, Ayatul Makarim, that they were sent to possibly Antakya, which is modern day Turkey. Some say these were the messengers of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. He sent 3 people, sent 2. The Quran says, وَأَزْدَدْنَا بِثَالِثٍ. We increased them, strengthened them to 3. 3 of them came to the people, Habib and Najjar, which was a carpenter. Some say he saw the miracles of just these messengers of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, that they cured his child, for example. He saw this. He's Habib and Najjar, he was a carpenter. And then the people come and they don't listen to the message of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. They kill the messengers. All 3 of them were killed. Quran then mentions the story of Habib. Doesn't say the name. Ja'a rajulun. Quran says the person came. It doesn't say who. You can recite Surah Yasin and hear the story. And then he came and mentioned, why don't you believe in them? Why don't you believe in Tawheed? It talks about monotheism when the entire city is against the message of the prophets, message of Prophet Isa. And the city here has already killed, for example, 3 of the messengers of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. How scary is that? For example, your entire city not only renounces, for example, the message, but they kill whoever is saying it. But here Quran is talking about a person who is fearless. He comes from the far away from parts of the city and says, why don't you believe in the message? Then Quran doesn't talk about how he's killed. It just says, then it talks about his conversation from Barzakh, and he's, a shaheed. This is one of the examples of a shaheed in the Quran. And he talks about, I wish that my people knew, that what type of honor Allah has given me. I wish they would have known that غَفَرَ لِي رَبِّي, that Allah has forgiven me, and has وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُكْرَمِينَ, and has made me of those who is honored. So you see, it's a very nice story about being courageous, being brave, and fighting for the truth. And you see these throughout the Quran, but sometimes it takes a person to do tadabbur and to think of the stories of Quran. And I think naturally when you recite the Quran and you connect to the Holy Quran and your iman is strong, you'll say, 1, death is up to Allah. Even if I'm in the buruj and the towers, death will come to me. 2, I have examples in the Holy Quran that I should be courageous and should fight for the truth. So the first thing we said is if a person truly becomes a true mu'min, he doesn't have fear. Many people were like this, and today contemporary people were like this. They, for example, would tell them, like, you're going to be assassinated, you're going to be killed, for example, and later on they're a shaheed. but they'll say, what are they scaring me with? For example, they're saying like, does it make sense? It's like you're scaring a fish, for example, with water. Is a fish get scared with water? This is something that they make dua for. So therefore, the first aspect that if we want to live a life that is peaceful, we want to live a life that we're not afraid, one that we're not anxious, one that we are calm. It is one of Iman. 2, dhikr of Allah. Man a'rada an dhikri fa'inna lahu ma'isha danka. They have a suffocating life. Whoever removes himself and turns away from my remembrance. The more you're connected to God, the more you have a good life. But the more that you are away from God's remembrance, and one of those examples is salat, for example. Salat is one of those that Quran says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Seek assistance with salat. If you're ever fearful, if you have anxiety, then work on your salat. Again, now there are some individuals that I'm not saying that if some person is prescribed in a certain way that they should, for example, stop having their medication or stop seeing, for example, a psychologist. That's, again, in that expert field, something else. We're talking about how to remedy the roots of the problem, a long-term solution for ourselves. This will then forth bring tawakkul, reliance on Allah. Did you ever see, for example, you're afraid, so maybe there are times in our lives, all of us will face this, that I don't have much money. I have to do something that I'm very fearful. Maybe it's giving a lecture, maybe it's a presentation. Maybe I have to try to sell something, do business, and maybe this customer will buy it, will not buy it. Maybe it is proposing to someone for marriage, or for example, or they are proposing for me, and should I accept, should I not? This fourth thing is called tawakkul, having reliance on God. Who is the one who has reliance on God? The one who believes that God is almighty. The one who believes that God is all wise. The one who believes that God is all powerful. That person will put his trust to Allah and say, Allah, according to my calculations, I don't have enough. According to my own, what comes in my mind, it's not enough. But I know the shaitan is trying to fear me of inability. But I trust on you. I give this affair to you because I know for you it is nothing. And this will cause me to not worry about it anymore. Imagine you have financial problems. A very rich person, billionaire, comes and says, I will help you with your financial problems. Would you be rest assured, for example, if you trust that person, for example, he has lots of money, he's generous? Yes. Well, what about the creator of that rich person? But Allah, we don't even trust him as much as we trust humans, unfortunately. So tawakkul means I don't know what's in front of me, I don't know what will happen, but I put these affairs in Allah's hands. And then I get calm. I don't have fear anymore. I don't have stress. I live a good life. The last is Iman in the rizq of Allah. أهلك الناس اثنان خوف الفقر وطلب الفخر. We have from Imam Ali alayhi salam, people were destroyed because of two things. Fear of poverty leads them to do haram, right? Haram income. With talab al-fakhr, they're trying to seek honor. They're trying to become popular with the people, for example. They want to be, very great in the eyes of people. They don't know that they have to be great in the eyes of Allah. And whoever Allah makes great, nobody can bring him down. So therefore, we see that these are 5 steps that we have in order to be one who is fearless. Now, and doesn't have anxiety. I'm going to end tonight's discussion from an interesting hadith from the life of Ali ibn Musa. Whoever wants to hear, recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another fear is fearing that the speech might be over. This is another thing. Don't worry. Inshallah, we're adding it so you don't have this type of anxiety. قِيلَ لَهُ. Remember Imam Rida alayhi salam, alhamdulillah, we had also majlis for him at the last day of Safar. Today's, this Rabi al-Awwal. It was for Imam Rida alayhi salam. And Tuaf al-Uqul has a very nice hadith. And I want you to try to put all of this together in this hadith and the whole purpose of this is to practice and to enhance ourselves and to change ourselves tomorrow. That's the whole purpose of these is, admonition, advice. A person came to Imam Rida alayhi salam, said, قِيلَ لَهُ كَيْفَ أَسْبَحْتَ. What does asbahta mean? How did you do soap? How did you awaken? How did you wake up? You know, a person wrote a book, for example, with all the narrations about kayfa asbahta, or for example, asbahtu. Now imagine, very good question. MashaAllah to this narrator. He asked Imam Rida alayhi salam, how do you wake up? Now, how do you personally wake up? Is it, do you have to drink coffee first? Is that what you're anxious of? Is there coffee in the coffee machine? Is there, for example, drinkable water because maybe the city water is not drinkable anymore? Whatever you're, how do you wake up? I'm worried about anxious. Am I late for work? And what would happen? And maybe you can, don't raise your hands, but tell me, in your heart's answer, who wakes up like this in the morning? How Imam Rida alayhi salam wakes up. Asbahtu, I wake up. بِأَجَلٍ مَنْغُوصٍ. I woke up with a shortened term of life. Naqs means that there is a limited lifespan. Every day I wake up, my life has increased or decreased. It's decreased. Every day I wake up, I realize I'm one step closer to death. So this is teaching us how to really be truly anxious or to have stress in a good way, positive way. And our problem has always been when you remove yourselves from fear of the hereafter, fear of God, then you allow for yourself fear of things that are useless in your, for example, in your heart. But Imam Rida alayhi salam, this I woke up fearing people, fearing poverty, what's going to happen with me, what's going to happen with Imam Jawad alayhi salam. He trusts in Allah. Asbahtu bi'ajalin manghus. I woke up with a shortened term of life. Wa amalin mahfuz. 2, with deeds being preserved. What does this mean? Deeds being preserved. I wake up this way. I realize that everything I do is being recorded, is being preserved. This is very scary in a way. Everything I do, everything I say, everything I hear, everything I'm the most sinful here. Imagine all these things. I remember some of the students in the beginning of the Hawza, they were so careful about what they would say. Some of their teachers would say, write whatever you said today. Every day they would write whatever they said. And which is, if it's going to be a lot, I guess maybe the next day they would speak less. And one of the purposes of this assumption, to stop talking, stop, to listen more, to observe more, reflect more, assumption, something good. So they said, what did you say? And imagine everything we said, how much of it was useless? How much of it was dunya? How much was, and God forbid, how much of it was haram? How many sins come from the tongue? They say to Luqman, they say there's a story that they came to Luqman, a Hakim, and he was a slave. And his master asked, bring the best part of the animal, for example. And Luqman cooked or brought the tongue, for example. And he ate the tongue. It was delicious, for example. He liked it. In the new generation, they'll say it's sick. Don't talk about it. Don't give me these stories. Then they asked, bring the worst part of the animal. Again, he brought the tongue. And they says, wait a minute, are you tricking me? What's going on? Best part of animal, tongue. Worst part of animal, tongue. Then he mentions that the tongue can be the best part of us, or it can be the worst part. With the tongue, I can praise Allah, do my salat, and make somebody happy. And with my tongue, I can backbite, I can ruin someone's reputation. I can use vulgar language against somebody. Amalin mahfuz. I wake up, every action is protected. 3, wal mawtu fi riqabina. I wake up, and the death is upon our necks. Israel is one day going to be coming, the angel of death is going to be visiting me. Wan naru min wara'ina. Here, wara usually is behind, but also in context can be in front. While the fire is in front of us, the hellfire. Imam Rida alayhi salam is concerned. This is something himself he's saying. Because the khawf, fear of fire is something that is good. وَلَا تَدْرِي مَا يُفْعَلُ بِنَا. But we do not know what is with us, what will happen to us. We have a shortened life term, very limited time to change ourselves. 2, this is how I wake up. My time here in the world is limited, but all my actions will be preserved. My death is upon our necks, and the fire is in front of us, and we do not know what will happen. This is the ham and gham of Imam Rida alayhi salam. Hopefully from tomorrow, and I'm saying this to myself, I can, for the next week, my homework is this. Try to wake up in the morning, and the first thing you wake up, to see what my life is limited, my actions are preserved, and death is in front of me, and I do not know where I will go. Then this will build you and will hopefully take away all that stress, all that anxiety you have that is negative, and you'll be too occupied on this part. And hopefully this will cause you to have a sweet and happy life, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahl bayti tayyibin tahirin. We are getting clearance from the AV department right now